Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Chancellor Ford not only for everything that's been done inside the walls, but outside the walls looks pretty spectacular the last couple of days. So we'll try and be very efficient because I know there's a couple of regents who already made afternoon tea times. So Jane, would you call the roll, please?
Regent Baling? Regent Bradley? Regent Drew? Regent Evers? Regent Falbo? Regent Farrell? Regent Higgins? Regent Rybar? Regent Landis? Regent Manydeeds? Regent Milner? Regent Mueller? Regent Peterson? Regent Pruitt? Regent Roberts? Regent Vasquez? Regent Welsh? Regent Whitburn? We have a quorum.
Thank you. The minutes of the July 11th and 12th and September 6th Board of Regents meetings have been provided. I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes. So moved. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. The reports of the Hospital Authority Board and Wisconsin Technical College System Board have been provided. Are there any comments or questions? Okay. Following up on our Common Ground Conference last month, Regents have been involved in a wide range of personal efforts to maintain open lines of communications with members of the legislature. Regent Vice President Milner and I have had numerous meetings with legislative leaders to discuss important UW policy issues, including many of our agenda items today. Also, Regent Higgins, I know, has had meetings with regard to the Ready Committee and specifically in regard to the grants that are coming. We'll talk about a little more later. Earlier this month, Regent Vice President Milner convened an informational briefing at the state capitol where UW staff discussed our plans to transition to a new high-speed, self-managed research and education data network. The transition to the new network was necessitated by legislation that requires the UW system to withdraw from WISCNet. And we wanted people to know that we're talking significant steps to comply with that mandate. The Capitol briefing provided legislature, legislative staff, and other interested parties with an opportunity to hear the details and ask questions. You'll hear more about this in Regent Whitburn's report from the Business and Finance Committee. In addition to legislative outreach, we've also been engaging with the mass media. Last month, Regent Pruitt and I met with the editorial board of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and we didn't argue at all amongst ourselves. It was a very good meeting. And I can tell you, it was very productive about the board's work on a number of big issues, including the new policy on program and revenue balances. A few days later, Regent Vice President Miller and I got together with the editorial board at the Wisconsin State Journal in Madison. You may have seen the resulting editorial that ran on September 30th under the headline, UW Board of Regents on the right track with more transparency communication. I know the Regents are also busy visiting UW campuses with the Ho-Chunk Nation, and UW-Eau Claire recently signed a memorandum of intent to pursue collaborative activities. Regent Manydeeds was there to represent the UW system at the ceremony. Thank you for that, Ed. This agreement, signed by Ho-Chunk Nation President Joe Greendeer and UW-Eau Claire Chancellor Schmidt, is the result of more than a year of exploration and discussion regarding potential higher education partnerships between the Ho-Chunk Nation and the university. I won't go any, I have more comments on that, but I think Ed did such a great job yesterday in explaining his position and our position that I'll bypass that. And again, thank you for your comments yesterday. I mentioned the Common Ground Conference. As many of you already know, the board office sent a survey by email to the majority of the people who attended the Finding Common Ground Conference last month to seek feedback on the event. Participants were asked to rate the individual conference session and give their overall impression of the conference. If that comes out positive, we'll share it with you. Oh, it did. Based on a survey response of almost 24%, I'm pleased to report that the conference was well received, The majority of survey respondents rated the individual conference sessions as either good or excellent, and more than 90% of respondents indicated that the conference was a step in the right direction. I can also tell you that based on anecdotal evidence, namely the many conversations that Regent Milner and I have had with legislators and others the past few weeks, the event was indeed a step in the right direction. We will, of course, continue our efforts to explore common ground during the coming months. I would like to provide a brief update on the search for a successor to President Riley, which may be an impossible task, but we're undertaking it anyway. At our last meeting, the Search and Screen Committee and the separate Regent Selection Committee were formally charged with the search process. Since then, we launched a special web page for the search and posted the full position description there. At this time, in conjunction with the search firm Storbeck, Pimentel and Associates, we are inviting nominations and applications for the next UW system president. Screening, vetting, and interviewing applicants will follow, with the ultimate goal of bringing forward a final candidate's name to the board's approval at our January meeting. It's a crunch time process, and a lot of people are working very hard on that. In just a few minutes, we will hear from Regent Whitburn on actions being taken to update the pertinent salary ranges, an important step towards attracting a solid applicant pool. You'll recall from last month's meeting that I asked Vice President Milner to develop overall goals for the board in the area of governance and board operations. She identified several areas of focus for the board and the board office during the next several months. One of these priorities was to revisit the work and recommendations of the Ad Hoc Committee on Board Roles and Responsibilities, also known as the Bradley Committee. That committee issued a report in February 2012. That's really the basis for us moving forward, is not to redo things that were extremely productive and pertinent, but to build on them. So thank you, Mark. The Ad Hoc Committee's work focused on the strategic engagement of the board, considering the board's key functions and responsibilities and how the board can best meet those functions and responsibilities. Several of the committee's recommendations were adopted and seamlessly incorporated into our meetings. For example, the board established Research, Economic Development, and Innovation Committee, and that committee has become a routine part of our two-day meeting schedule. In addition, we have been having a series of presentations from chancellors regarding their strategic goals, which was another recommendation of the Ad Hoc Committee. And some of us recall that up until about a year and a half ago, we started our Thursday morning meetings at 10 a.m. rather than the current 9 a.m., another recommendation from the committee. Another change was the use of written committee reports after the Thursday committee meetings in order to cut down on the length of the verbal committee chair reports on Friday mornings. We've been half successful with that. Many of the Regent Roles and Responsibilities Committee's recommendation had to do in one way or another with the board's using its time as wisely as possible by staying focused on strategic issues and policy setting rather than operational issues. In looking at this report again, I noticed that the committee suggested that the system should lead the campuses. I believe the system should support the campuses, but maybe we can talk about that in the course of our discussion. Since Regina is working on the governance and operational aspects of the board planning process, I'd like to turn to her to lead a discussion among board members of some of the recommendations and outcomes of Roles and Responsibilities Committee. Regina?
Thank you, President Falbo. As President Falbo mentioned, I was asked to identify areas for the board to consider as it reviews its governance, responsibilities, and operations. You'll recall that some of the areas I mentioned in September included a board self-assessment, continued review of Regent policy documents, and a regular review of the standing committee's work on their priorities. Since good work has already been done to examine the governance duties of the board, one of the items on our priority list was to follow up on the recommendations of the group that looked into these issues within the last couple of years. Highlighted from that committee's report were included in the board packages along with some questions for Regents' consideration, and I hope you've had an opportunity to review those. Overall, the Ad Hoc Committee's theme was that the board needed to be more fully engaged in thinking strategically, policy-setting activities, and thinking about significant issues in higher education. Mike mentioned some of the specific recommendations that have been adopted. This is an opportunity for us to focus on whether the changes that have already been made are working for us, as well as what other actions we would like to consider. This is just one piece of the puzzle. We'll also be soliciting feedback from the Regents on other governance and operational issues in the coming weeks. So I'm not expecting that we would vote on specific actions today. But I hope that we can have a discussion that helps us to evaluate the progress made so far and to assess how we as a board might go about our business effectively. I'm hoping to leave some time toward the end of our discussion for President Riley and the other chancellors to provide any feedback they might have. So with that, perhaps we can start off the discussion by reflecting on the responsibilities that the Bradley Committee identified. These are in the table beginning on page 2 of the summary in your Friday materials. I'd like us to consider as we go forward with the board planning process whether there are areas in the list of Regent responsibilities that should be emphasized or need particular attention. Are there any comments from the Regents at this point before we begin to go through our questions? What I'd like to do right now is go through the questions that are on page 2 and 4 and enter them into the record, but I don't want to stop with every question and discuss it at that point. Rather, I'd like us to go through and see if I'll read them into the record, and then we'll go back and have discussion items on anything that you are particularly interested. The first question is, are there areas on the list of Regent responsibilities on page 2 and 4 that should be emphasized or that need particular attention? If so, what actions should the board take? Secondly, are there ways that the board can or should enhance its a focus on policy setting as compared to operations, consistent with the 2012 report? Third, what additional significant higher education issues should be considered at board meetings? How much time should be focused on these types of issues? Fourth, have Chancellor's strategic goals presentations been informative and effective at providing Regents with a bigger picture view of each institution? Is there additional information that would be helpful? 5, what does the current board meeting schedule allow sufficient time for Regent advocacy and strategic engagement? Should the 6 two-day and 2 one-day meeting schedule be re-examined? 6, the READY Committee is still new, but should the purpose of READY or any other standing committee be re-examined as was done recently with Business and Finance Committee when the Audit Committee was created? 7, have committees effectively streamlined their agenda to maintain a strategic focus? And 8, should the practice of distributing electronic reports on Thursday evenings after committee meetings continue? Are the reports useful? Or should committee chairs return to providing fuller verbal reports at the Friday meetings? All right, let's open the discussion. I'll start with number 1, and then if anyone wants to slip into other areas, please feel comfortable to do that. What about the area of Regent responsibilities? And should there be a need for a particular attention? And if so, what action should the board take? Should we open it up? Regent Vasquez.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that's been done on this, and it's a very, very thoughtful document. The idea that came across as I was reading the list, and in light of the common ground discussion and other things that have been happening since, and I don't know if it will fit exactly in this grid, but legislative relations is one that I don't think it was as clearly stipulated or stated here. And maybe it's already within the purview of the executive committee to do, but it seems to me that we need to have that happening on a regular basis, and I'm proposing that it be the leadership of the board, not to be confused with other work that is being done by systems administration and staff. It just seems to me that we need to make sure we don't forget it, we don't overlook it, and that it happens. And again, it may already be happening, it's just, it wasn't clearly articulated here.
You make a great point, and we've been working on it so hard, and we missed it. We missed writing it down, but I guarantee you we're working on it in many ways, not just the visits, but in many other ways as we're reviewing structure within the system. And there'll be more on that coming in future meetings, but thanks for bringing that up. Sometimes it's a thing right in front of your face that you forget to put down.
Regent Higgins.
Regent Milner, I want to follow up on Regent Vasquez's suggestion. Under accountability, we have submitted annual accountability report to the governor and legislature. My comment would be that I think we need to make sure that the leaders of the administration and legislature are continuously informed of system progress, accomplishments, and challenges. And we also need to keep abreast of the political trends that affect their political situation so that we can judge what's important to them from our point of view.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Regent Milner.
Yes, Regent Farrell?
I have a question. Is there any place that the actual charge to the system board is identified? If I wanted to say, is this really within our purview, or is this something we should be adding to it? I have no idea where it is.
You're the first regent that I've ever heard ask, is it really within our purview? So thank you for that.
No, I'm serious in terms of, looking at things in the 3.5 or so months I've been here. I'm not sure.
David.
The statute in Chapter 36 do lay out the administrative and board responsibilities on
I know I have a copy of that.
Thank you.
Let me ask about orientations for new regents. Are we still doing that? And have we thought about expanding it to be broader than what we might have done? Because this is an incredibly complex organization, as we're all finding, never mind how long we've been on the region. So I would encourage a broader opportunity for new regents to kind of walk through the key responsibilities that they will encounter, for instance, through the budget process, through the search and screen, expectations with regard to participation, that commencement exercise, thing like that.
That's a good point. And actually, I'd like to refer to the new regents because Jane put together a pretty comprehensive program for them. We even dusted off old Regent President Emeritus Spector to run it for us because he did such a good job in the past. So if the regents that went through that very recently would speak to that.
I guess I have the responsibility to follow up on my question by saying, yes, it was very helpful. But there still is, I felt a little bit more in terms of, should we be digging as deeply as we are? Are we stopping too short on some of the relationships and interrelationships? And last thing I need is, going further than we should be going.
just a commentary on the engagement that we had. It was Jan and Margaret and Chad and I, and we covered a multitude of issues, as you might expect. Regent Emeritus Spector did an outstanding job of covering all of the responsibilities we maintain, but as you know, this is a highly complex organization, so to do that in a 5 to 6 hour interval was no shortage of being daunting. But it gives you a good foundation for where we need to be. It gives us the opportunity to, I think, probe a little bit further. But to Margaret's question, there are a great inventory of responsibilities in Chapter 36 that we can always sort of underscore.
I call your attention to question number 5 about the current Regent schedule, because I've heard comments from colleagues about the schedule. And does anyone have a thought about our current schedule?
Good morning. I'm about to make myself the most unpopular new board member. So good morning. But
Except for the
put
new
me
part.
next to you. But I do favor having 2-day meetings when we're meeting. The 1-day meeting, we had a 2-day meeting anyway in September. So I think we're already ramped up to read the materials and be together. There's so much that we have to do. Regent Farrell certainly alluded to that. So I think keeping the same number of meetings but having the 2-day schedule and abandoning the 1-day schedule is something that I favor.
Regent Bradley, rebuttal.
I've been through this with popular regents and unpopular regents. Just a little history. When the ad hoc group came up with its recommendations, it had looked at national statistics of governing boards of large systems. And as a generally accurate statement, you would say that historically the UW System Board of Regents met more often than any other large system board. We also looked at recommendations of best practices from the Association of Governing Boards. And we had quite a bit of disagreement within the committee as to how many meetings per year and length of meetings, all that. So we ended up, like any good committee, except for United States Congress, we had a compromise. What we put forward was finally a unanimous recommendation, but there was lots and lots of discussion. I mean, some people thought we should meet every single month, and we've got lots to do, and we could, if we had more meetings, we could dive into more detail, which of course President Riley's staff just loved to hear that. And we also talked about the burden on the staff of preparing for us, the care and feeding of the regents and the amount of time that takes for the staff to stop doing what they would normally be doing for the campuses, for the institutions, and what they then have to do for us in order to just prepare for a meeting like this. So, there isn't an answer, and what we came up with was a compromise recommendation, and that's it.
Regent Menedides?
Thank you. Part of that discussion also, Regent Bradley, was, as you recall, the length of the meetings. When I started, they started at 10 o'clock, and sometimes we were done at 3 o'clock with lunch the first day, and then had to wait until the next day to do some more work. And now we start at 9 and sometimes go until 5, which is just fine with me. So we can get more done and accomplish a lot of good things in that first day, and the second day we come in and do some more work. So we try to expand the actual working hours that we had, and it's been good. I appreciated having to, not that I'm complaining, but drive somewhere for several hours and then just sitting around wasn't a lot of fun for me. So, but now I've got something to do. So I favored this compromise because of that fact over what we used to have, and that was discussed. Thank you.
I think the other thing, Jan, is as we did with the Common Ground meeting, that was supposed to be a one-day meeting, and we turned it into a two-day meeting. That flexibility is always there if we feel that we have the topics or we need to dive into something.
Thank you. I think my proposal is going down in flames, so I'll give up. But I do think that we as new Regents in particular struggle with priority setting. There's just so much. It is a $6 billion enterprise. And let's face it, we still are in a phase of restoring trust and credibility with our stakeholders. So I just think more is better, particularly when there is so much ramp-up time to get ready for the meetings on the part of the Regents and the staff.
I think Regent Higgins wants to weigh in on this.
How did you figure that out? First, I want to note that there has been a sea change. I have been referred to by other Regents as a veteran now. That's downright scary. The point I'd like to make is that our Regent meetings have general gatherings like this, and then we spend some time in committee meetings. Personally, I think that we need more time to meet, but I'm not sure that we need more time in this setting to meet if we can routinely have our committees meet as the READY Committee has met by teleconference. Because, if you need to take care of business, then it doesn't have to necessarily be here on a monthly basis. Having said that, I think that we're going to have a lot on our plate as we change system leadership and we change system structure. And I hark back to that Joker committee meeting in May where we had Senator Ellis and Senator Darling and Senator Fitzgerald and Speaker Voss all asking the questions, where were the Regents in all this? And personally, I know that many of us take that to heart. And we have had to do a better job of engaging ourselves in some of the detail in order to be able to respond to that kind of criticism. So I'm not sure that we need to change the meeting structure, but I certainly agree with Jan that we should be probably spending more time rather than less getting together to deal with the issues the system needs to adjust.
Regent Vasquez.
I think that question about where were the Regents is one that will never produce a satisfactory answer when there is a problem that is perceived by others that there is a problem. We could have been meeting every single day, and the question would still be asked, where were the Regents? I think we need to understand that question and put it within the right context. If everything is going fine according to those that are going to ask that question, the question would never be asked. If they perceive there's a problem, we could be meeting every day, be next to Kevin, and it would still be where were the Regents when that problem happened. My advice is that we go back to the discussion that Richard Miller has set up and really focus on what are the priorities, what are the things that we as a governing body are held responsible to govern and do the best that we can around that. My belief, especially in this public arena, we will always be criticized by someone that we have not done our job, that we were not as vigilant as we should have been, that we were not there when we should have been there. And if we worry about trying to eliminate that criticism, we will never leave any of our duties because we're going to have to do them 24/7. But when something goes wrong, it didn't matter that we were spending 24/7. You weren't doing your job. And I think that it has been outlined very well for us. And I also thank Regent Farrell for reminding us there is a chapter, that legal chapter that we have to be responsible to. And let's focus on that. And let's focus on what really will continue to make this a strong university system. And realize that inevitably, no matter how good we think we're doing a job, somebody's going to ask, where were you when I saw this problem? And I don't think it's an issue of time. It's an issue of focusing on the right issues. And I think, Regent Higgins, you gave us a good lead. And I go back to what I suggested. We do need to have that discussion with the legislators. We got to anticipate where they think we have a problem, not trying to guess ahead of time. Because if we're going to try to guess, how do we avoid anybody asking us, where were we? That's a fool's folly that we're going to try to figure out. I don't think so. I'm comfortable with the schedule. I would suggest we go back to the discussion and prioritize and do the best that we can there, recognizing that inevitably somebody's going to ask, where were the Regents?
Thank you. Any other comments? Seems we got a lot. Regent Farrell.
I guess the one thing I tend to not like a lot of meetings. I like substantive meetings. I think most of ours that I've experienced are pretty substantive. I tended to think, why can't we do this in a day and have the committee meetings by phone or something to add if there needed to be more. I'm not going to press that matter right now because I'm one of the newbies and I'm still trying to get my feet under the issues. What I would say is, material-wise, I guess I would like things a little earlier, and I have all respect for the staff. I'm not trying to make problems for the staff at all. But I think that the earlier we can see what's coming, to have time to ask either the committee chair that has responsibility for that area, what's really going to happen there? Or what are you trying to get to with that? Or go to President Falbo and ask him. I don't even know what to ask now within a week of the board meeting. Now when we get our material, then I start reading through it, then I come up with the questions. And if we all did that to Mike, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. I just think a little more lead time, which is the hardest thing for all of us to do, to get organized and time things so that it gets done. But I think we have to somehow identify the issues and make sure we've got background in them. And so if we have questions, so we're not found flat-footed without the information, or in the public arena here without the information that we may need, that would be where the problem comes. That would be the request I'd have at this point, at this early time in my service.
You might have to give us a little time on that one. Jane is kind of half-staffed right now, but I appreciate what you're saying.
And I began by saying I wasn't trying to create a problem for staff. I understand that. It's just if there's something we can do in our responsibility. So, I mean, it has to be done at some point during the month. And if it could just come out a little bit, or a 2-month period, if it could just come out a little earlier, it would really be helpful, at least to this person.
Regent Pruitt?
Well, thank you. We have been through over time some ongoing conversations about this exact topic, and I guess one of the things that I just wanted to remark about or sort of point out is I think one of the things that the Bradley Commission suggested and that came out of that was the combination of 6 two-day meetings and 2 one-day meetings, with the idea that the one-day meetings would focus on higher level, big picture sort of issues in higher education generally. And I think there's a lot of common sense to that, because I think one of the challenges that I think I've certainly had in my time on the board, and others may not have had it quite as much as I have, is to put these conversations into context. And sort of, the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, meeting-to-meeting agendas are important. We have a series of, as Regent Whitburn calls them, done pile issues that we need to sort of move through. But looking at these issues in a broader context, as it relates to the future of higher education in Wisconsin is also important. And finding venues and ways to sort of grapple with those is also important. For example, one of the questions is what are some of those issues? And I think we've all struggled with the issue of affordability of college and how are we going to handle questions related to tuition policy and reserve balances and program balances and all the other things to ensure that students have the opportunity to attend college going forward in Wisconsin. That is a topic for a one-day meeting. It is harder to wedge in to a two-day meeting when you are simultaneously having committee meetings and doing the rest of the business of the board. So I think there's some possible restructuring of how these 6 days, these 6 two-day and 2 one-day sessions could be held, but I'd at least suggest that might be one common ground we might reach in terms of meeting a variety of needs.
Thank you. Regent Bradley.
Not as having been involved with that ad hoc committee, but just as a regent, I think that the theory behind this setting aside a day and taking one of these big complicated topics and having time to hear a presentation and then have a serious discussion about it, I would give that a C+ or a B-. I just don't think that has worked out the way we envisioned it. From my standpoint, we have sometimes a cost of bringing somebody in. They prepare, they come, they present, and then there hasn't been a lot of dialogue among the regents after that big presentation. Now, I don't know how we get there. Maybe it's assembling material and asking us to read that material, but if there's an interest in more time for board discussion, more time for committee meetings, I don't think it would be so bad to consider sacrificing that idea that I think was better in theory than has actually worked out in practice.
Thank you. Interesting comment. Are there any more comments? There's some prosaic questions. Question 8, the practice of distributing the electronic reports on Thursday evening. And that's a consideration. I would remark, because that was something that was instituted new when I went in, one of the complications for me has been our meetings have extended until at least 5 o'clock. And it makes it after a rigorous day, it makes it difficult to go through those. Now, it seems that we might consider how that's done. And what the discussion is on the next day of the committee meetings. So
after a rigorous reception, it makes it hard to do.
That too. I want to thank you for this good discussion. Self-assessment is never easy, and this discussion isn't over. And the advantage, or shall we say the disadvantage we have of our self-assessment is we get to do it with an audience and with the cameras. So I appreciate your comments, and we'll summarize these observations that have been made today and use them as we continue to assess the board's governance responsibility and operations. And I invite you to get back with us about any comments you might have about any of these 8 questions so that we can incorporate that into these observations. Back to you, President Falbo.
Thank you, Regina. Yes.
Thanks, and good morning, everybody. Very good discussion. I just had 2 quick comments on it. When we try to put together the orientation session for new regents, we really struggle with a lot of issues you're bringing up, and we're mindful of, you've got folks coming in for 5 hours, and you're just loading them down with all sorts of stuff, hoping that some of it sticks, or at least you'll know which office to go to ask a question
by virtue of that. You won't remember everything anybody told you about any one of the issues. So it may be that we could do a little better job with a little more of a series of orientations. And I like Regent Whitburn's suggestion of maybe having some sort of big process issues that you would spend, an hour and a half on with new regents, like the budget process, like the search and screen processes. And there are others that you might consider doing that with. And to Regent Farrell's comment about overall trying to feel your way as a governing board of a large public system into how deep should you go, how close to the surface should you stay. There's been talk about how you combine the jobs of being both advocates and watchdogs, and the Association of Governing Boards, which I think Mike mentioned and which Chuck is the liaison to, has a lot of good people who have worked with boards around the country on these big issues that every board like this grapples with. Those two in particular, how deep, how shallow, how much advocacy, how much watchdog. And I'd urge you to consider bringing some of those people in from AGB for a deep discussion of some of this. There's a lot of good experience out there that I think we can all learn from. And I've worked with other boards, and I've been part of some of those conversations in AGB, and I don't think we do badly on these issues at all. But I think, especially with the number of new regents we have, trying to think their way through those issues, it would be useful to have some outside expertise.
I would just like to make a comment. So we finish an all-day meeting under this current system, and we need to recognize that the people who prepare these reports for us have also spent all day working, and then we go to a reception and they're continuing to work for a couple of more hours, and then if a regent makes any editorial changes to a report, sometimes you're getting these final reports at 9 p.m. Well, that meant that staff person who started at 7:30 or 8, has now said, well, I sure am glad that this regent is happy. It's now 9:10 p.m. and my day is finished. I think we need to be sensitive to that too. I think that is an unintended consequence of this again, this theory that, well, write up the reports and then they would be there. Regents check their emails in the morning, and they can spend some time, not staff, but regents could spend some of their time reading these reports on Friday morning. That's great, but I think what has happened is that our loyal, hardworking staff spends a pretty long day on Thursday as a result, and get up early on Friday to make sure that whatever changes have to be made in these reports get completed. So I don't think that was certainly not intended, and I think as it has worked out, I don't think it's fair.
Jose.
I think it's a wonderful discussion we've had, and I'd like just to bring up a discussion that Jane and I had some time back that we may want to consider, and suggestions on alternatives to how we're doing things. The good thing is that governing is not new in any sense of the word. And Jane and I had a discussion about an electronic method of keeping boards engaged that allows them to have even an electronic resource site where they can go, where we could put all the orientation materials there, the state statutes, that we would have access to professional development online, what's happening with all the committees and all sorts of things that are, these are electronic boards that have been designed exclusively around governing. And that may be a method that I would encourage us, and especially the leadership, to explore with Jane. Is that an alternative that would allow us to handle orientation? You get the 5 hours, but then there's still lots of other ways that you can get even more at your leisure. And same thing with other resources, other materials. We don't have to get them all at the same time. As staff prepares them, they put them up there, and then we go and get them. So I think we should be creative and not just thinking, as Regent Higgins suggested, not every meeting has to be at the same time in the same format, electronic or other methods of doing things.
Thank you. I wanted to, Ed, go ahead.
Just one quick thought, and probably someone already thought about it. Could we, to avoid the late night staff work, which is not right, could we have our committee meetings right away in the morning, get those done with, and then have the rest of the presentations and those other discussions in the afternoon or later on in the morning and then through the afternoon. That way we could get our work done with the committees, which is not usually connected to the presentations, done right away, and then start off with the rest of the meeting. It's just a suggestion. I don't know if it would work, but...
Thank you. That's a good suggestion. I wanted to expand on one more thing that Mark had said when he was talking about the staff. And when we're talking about who's where or where were you, or, you know, we may live it intermittently in our lives, but and I know we all know this, and but you know, the people on this side of the room and the people on that side of the room live it every second, every day, and I just wanted to point that out. It's very important. Also, we're going to go on now to some lighter topics that Kevin's going to lead us through, like the federal shutdown. So, Kevin, it's all yours.
Thank you, Regent Falbo. Unless Dave Giroux tells me that the grand compromise was made in Washington moments ago, and I don't need to talk about this, I will talk a little bit about the federal shutdown. And we've all been bombarded with this news constantly over the last number of days, and I thought you might want to know something at a pretty high level about what the impacts of this shutdown have been on the university. First of all, I'm happy to say there's been little impact on federal student aid. That's because the Pell Grants and the federal student loans come from permanent multi-year funding that's not part of the shutdown, not affected by the shutdown. And the same is true for veterans benefits. The Department of Veterans Affairs will continue processing and paying claims on education benefits and programs through late October. It's a little bit unclear there, however, what will happen after that with the availability of housing benefits, for instance, from the VA, on which many of our veterans depend, and whether that will continue or not, there seems to be some lack of clarity about. Federally funded research is an area where we've already seen an impact. These programs are funded primarily through the annual discretionary federal budget, those appropriations, and that's the process that's shut down. We all know research is an important part of all of our campuses, especially at Madison, especially at Milwaukee, and our campuses are dealing with lots of different federal agencies, each of which may be advising different courses of action with respect to pending grants and contract applications. Some institutions have, from some of their federal agency partners, received the stop work orders, which impact employees and graduate students whose pay must be covered with other funding sources than the federal sources for the time being. Communications from most of the federal agencies have been pretty limited. Awards are not being issued. Travel restrictions are in place in a number of instances, and all of this is impacting the projects and complicating our national and international research collaborations. For existing federal grants and contracts, UW institutions rely on the regular cash drawdowns from those accounts to cover expenditures. At this time, most of those drawdowns have stopped. So in order to keep our employees, and we have a lot of them who are funded through federal programs, employed and paid, our chancellors are covering those costs through those things we call reserves. As events continue to unfold, we'll be as nimble as we can in managing this challenge to the best of our ability to ensure that our students and employees are not jeopardized and the important work at our institutions continues. Obviously, the longer this goes on, the more complicated it becomes for all of us, so we're certainly very much in the camp of wanting to get it done and get the government open again. On a much happier note, the UW system just announced that it will receive a $1.2 million grant from the Lumina Foundation. This grant will assist with our evaluation of the UW flexible option, the system's new competency-based credentialing model, and it will also provide support for developing a blueprint for other universities to build similar programs. And I want to emphasize that second part especially, because the Lumina Foundation, which is one of the 2 or 3 leading higher ed foundations in the country now, very influential, sees the work that folks are doing here on the flexible option as real nation-leading work, and they want our colleagues who are doing that to document it very carefully so that other large systems that may want to consider doing something similar will have a clear roadmap for doing it. So it's a high compliment to the work that Chancellor Cross and Aaron Brower and Rebecca Karoff and a whole bunch of other people have been doing. So we're very, very pleased to have that grant. An update on the Chief Audit Executive search. That is underway, a search and screen committee that's co-chaired by Regent Mueller and Counsel Tom Stafford. Received its charge this past Wednesday from Regent Whitburn and me. The search firm of Korn Ferry is the one that's working with us in identifying and vetting candidates for that really important position. The final interviews are expected to take place in mid to late January in order to allow for the participation in the final selection of the person who we hope will be the president-designate at that time. They may not be here, but hopefully you will have made that choice, and then that new president, Regent Whitburn, can do the final interviews of the finalists for that very important position. A few bits of news from around the system. UW-Stout has announced that it will be collaborating with Thomson Reuters, the professional information and media company, to launch a new minor in web technology. It includes a course on search engine optimization that's believed to be the first of its kind in the nation in post-secondary education. Thomson Reuters is supporting the effort with a financial donation, as well as helping with curriculum development and providing instructors for the course. So congratulations to Chancellor Sorensen and the Stout campus on that. Authorization of and appropriations for a national program that would provide capacity building funds for non-land grant colleges of agriculture and natural resources have been a priority for the UW System Office of Federal Relations and our campuses at River Falls, Platteville, and UW-Stevens Point for several years. The program was first authorized in the 2008 Farm Bill. Since that time, with the help of our congressional delegation from Wisconsin and working with a coalition of members of Congress from across the country, about $4.5 million has been appropriated, and now in each of the past 2 years, to fund research, education, and outreach activities related to agriculture at the non-land grant institutions. The result, well, last year, UW-Platteville was awarded a 3-year competitive grant for Upper Mississippi River Basin research on crop nutrition management. I see Regent Landis shaking his head. And just this past month, UW-River Falls learned that 2 faculty members of the UW-River Falls Animal and Food Science Department, Justin Luther and Amy Reduns, have received a $733,000 grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture National Institute of Food and Agriculture to fund a project called Strategies to Improve Reproductive Performance in the U.S. Beef Cattle Industry. This grant, which is a collaborative effort between or among River Falls, UW-Madison, and Biozyme, Inc., will be directed by UW-River Falls and give its students the opportunity to gain really valuable hands-on practical experience with modern cattle reproductive management techniques. So kudos to the leadership of our UW System Federal Relations Office, Chris Andrews, and our UW System campuses for developing those partnerships. UW-Richland shares the news that it has welcomed 36 international students this fall from 14 different nations. Now, if you know anything about UW-Richland, it's in that town called Richland Center, a town of about 5,000 people. The campus has about 500 students, so that's a pretty impressive international presence that's being brought into our midst in the middle of Wisconsin by that campus. So congratulations to Dean Patrick Hagan and to Chancellor Ray Cross. Speaking of numbers, UW-Platteville is on a roll Platteville reports that it currently has about 1,500 students enrolled now from Iowa and Illinois through the Tri-State Initiative. That's up from 163 students back in 2005 in the first year of that initiative. The Tri-State Initiative, you I think know, most of you, offers students from Iowa and Illinois the opportunity to take advantage of an attractive tuition rate at UW-Platteville. They basically pay in-state tuition plus a $4,000 premium, which in most cases is lower than what they would pay even if they stayed at home at some institutions in those two states. So as part of that agreement, Platteville keeps the $4,000 from each TSI student to invest in such things as more faculty and staff positions and facilities. In 2013-14, 181 full-time positions are directly funded by TSI money. For students, the Tri-State Initiative gives them access to program majors at UW-Platteville that match the economic needs of the area. And that means STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and I think Dennis likes to call it STEAM to get agriculture, the A letter in the STEM word, agriculture, biology, business, criminal justice, even some majors in education, fine arts, and psychology. I don't know if the fine arts part was to support the Mineral Point artist colony down by you, maybe. So the bump in the TSI numbers has also led to Platteville's enrollment now being the highest in its 147-year history, with 8,662 students enrolled this fall. So congratulations to Chancellor Shields and the Platteville community. As we all know, internships, while often unpaid, offer students an important opportunity to work in their field of study while still in college, and it also sets those students up to very often have much quicker, easier glide paths into employment after they graduate. But for many students who are already going to class, studying, holding down a job, taking an unpaid internship may be out of reach. As a result, these students may be missing out on some real-world experience that really would make them more competitive on the job market after graduation. To address that challenge, the Great Lakes Higher Education Guarantee Corporation has awarded now $2.5 million, $2.5 million in what they're calling Career-Ready Internship Initiative grants to 19 Wisconsin colleges and universities. And I'm pleased to note that that includes 6 UW institutions: Green Bay, Milwaukee, Oshkosh, River Falls, Stevens Point, and Superior. The idea is that colleges will partner with businesses throughout the state to not only create new paid internships, but to convert existing unpaid internships into paid ones. The grant-funded internships will be made available to students who don't receive enough financial aid to cover their college costs. The Great Lakes Corporation expects that nearly 1,300 Wisconsin college students will benefit from these grants. So, boy, this is really a great program. We really know what a positive impact these internships have on students completing their courses of study, completing them with more understanding of those courses' connections to the real world, and then getting a job after that. At a previous meeting, the board has had the opportunity to hear about the inaugural MOOC being offered by UW-La Crosse. Well, I'm pleased to share the news that not long ago, UWL's MOOC won a national award for collaboration. The 2013 Desire to Excel Award is given to individuals, groups, or organizations that display exemplary ingenuity, creativity, and collaboration in empowering students to achieve their academic goals. In addition, the UWL MOOC was also one of just 33 initiatives out of 266 national and international submissions to receive an MRI grant from the Great Gates Foundation. That's a nice acronym, MRI. It stands in this case for MOOC Research Initiative from the Gates Foundation. That will help us at La Crosse further evaluate the MOOC and how the MOOC impacts teaching, learning, and education in general. We're at a stage now where there's enough of this activity going on that we really do need to have a good evaluation regimen to figure out if we're getting to the outcomes we want to get to. Regent Farrell? MOOC stands for Massively Open Online Course. So these are courses being offered online to huge numbers of students internationally, mostly not for credit at this point. And I'll say a word at the end of my comments on La Crosse about what Madison is doing in this regard as well. So it's a new way for colleges and universities to reach students all around the world with their courses in a way that's relatively cost efficient, both for the university but certainly for the students. So it's one of the potentially revolutionary things that's going on in higher education right now. And the lacrosse course is a remedial math course available to help people of all ages all around who need to get some math skills before they come back to the university to study for a degree. I won't go on with that, but I just want to say congratulations to Chancellor Gall and his colleagues at UW-La Crosse for the great work that's been done there. And then putting further moo in the MOOC from the Dairy State, this fall UW-Madison is starting the enrollment of its 4 MOOCs, and I was talking with Paul DeLuca, I don't know if he's here today or not, but yesterday about this. Daryl is, I know. So if you recall, UW-Madison has committed with one of the MOOC companies, Coursera, to offer 4 MOOC courses, and there are 34,000 students enrolled in the first one now on game theory, which is up and running. And Paul told me that to date, 85,000 students have either enrolled or expressed interest among the 4 MOOCs that Madison will be offering. So another very interesting experiment to watch closely. I also have some news from UW Cooperative Extension. Back in March, Cooperative Extension distributed Google Nexus 7 tablets to 725 faculty and staff members, almost 3/4 of its 1,000 employees. The idea here was not just to equip them with new technology, but to help its employees who are located in the 72 county offices of Cooperative Extension all over the state to collaborate more effectively, not only with each other, but also with the communities they serve. And by all reports, this has transformed Cooperative Extension's work with farmers and families and schools and local governments, allowing them to share instantly information and to cut travel costs. So that project was highlighted recently in EdTech magazine. I think you have a copy of that article in your materials today, the red folders. So congratulations to Chancellor Cross and Cooperative Extension. And from UW-Oshkosh, a collaborative project involving Oshkosh, Winnebago County, the city of Oshkosh, and that city's industrial development agency just got a tremendous boost. And Chancellor Wells mentioned this yesterday in his remarks on economic development and outcomes. U.S. Representative Tom Petri announced last month that those partners' Aviation Business Accelerator project at Whitman Airport is the recipient of a $2 million federal Economic Development Administration grant. The accelerator is a planned 20,000 square foot building designed to house light manufacturing and office space, with tenants expected to benefit from mentoring, early stage business funding, networking, and more. It's the kind of economic development that UW-Oshkosh's Aero Innovative Initiative has been directly involved in sparking, both in Oshkosh and in the New North. The Aviation Business Accelerator is also envisioned as a catalyst for the aviation business at Whitman Airport, where the broader vision calls for development of an approximately $10 million, 80-acre aviation business park. The ultimate goal is to help new companies and entrepreneurs within a budding aviation business cluster grow Northeast Wisconsin's aviation economy and, of course, bring new jobs to the region. So hats off to Chancellor Wells and his colleagues for being at the middle of an exciting new, what we hope will be a rapidly expanding business cluster in the northeast part of the state. I'm going to skip a number of other things I was going to mention in the interest of time. These will all, however, be up on our website after the meeting, and you can look there to learn more. I want to finish with one other mention, however, and that's to extend congratulations to an organization called UW-Help, which stands for Higher Education Location Program. It's celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, and you might not know that this HELP organization makes about 35,000 contacts each year. And you probably also didn't know that UW-Help was the brainchild of Regent Mark Bradley 40 years ago. Back in 1974, Mark and a graduate student buddy named Don Steele conceived of the idea of the Higher Education Location Program, or HELP. And I have to believe that the power of a good acronym is part of what made it survive for 40 years. At that time, University of Wisconsin was merging with the Wisconsin State University to form what we now know as the UW system. And Mark and Don had the foresight to see the challenge as well as to form the solution to create a service for the people of the state to ensure system-wide access to information to help navigate the new University of Wisconsin system. The technology of the day was telephones and probably rotary phones, Mark, something many students today may not even recognize. And campus information was stored on huge Rolodex card carousels. So talk about antiquities. Coming back to the president, UW Help to the present. UW Help has become, I think, an indispensable model program that serves not only the people of the state and beyond, but also the UW system and all of its institutions. As you can well imagine, the tools used today and methods of delivery have changed a lot, but the mission is still the same. And Help is one of the organizations, back to a question I think Regent Landis asked yesterday, that does interact extensively with the high school counselors about degree requirements and admissions standards. One of the new media, obviously, is video, and I want to share a brief 3-minute example of that with you. This is a video titled Journey Through Financial Aid, which was produced by the media team at UW Help and UW Extension's Continuing Ed Outreach and E-Learning Arm division. So if we can cue that up and run that video, that would be great.
When it comes to your future as a college student, one of the questions you'll ask is, how am I going to pay for this? A great way to start is with financial aid. It's a great resource that can help cover the various costs of attending college. Financial aid can come in many forms and work in different ways. Grants are money awarded based on a student's financial need and do not require repayment. Scholarships are awarded based on academic achievement or other criteria, which may include financial need. Scholarships usually need to be applied for and also do not require repayment. Loans may be offered to you or your parents at low interest rates. Loans must be repaid, but in most cases, repayment does not begin until after graduation. Work-study employment means the student is awarded the opportunity for part-time employment during the academic year. Even if you are not awarded work-study, you can still work part-time on or off campus. Taking advantage of financial aid is a great way to help ease the burden of college expenses. Knowing what is available to you is important, but you should also understand where this money comes from. The largest source of financial aid is the federal government. The state of Wisconsin also has various financial aid programs, and most University of Wisconsin system campuses award institutional grants or scholarships on their own. There are also many private sources of financial aid. You and your family or other adults should pursue possible funding from local organizations, employers, foundations, and corporations. This is all important stuff, but on to the big question about financial aid. How do you get it? The first step is the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. That's right, free, meaning it doesn't cost anything to apply for Federal Student Aid. To begin your FAFSA application, you and your parents or guardians each need to get a Federal Personal Identification Number, or PIN, by visiting pin.ed.gov. Once you have your PIN, you can complete your application at FAFSA.gov. Don't wait. Complete the FAFSA as soon as possible after January 1st for the next academic year. FAFSA is an important part of financial aid, but remember that most colleges and universities offer their own financial aid opportunities as well. Read their websites and talk with advisors to learn all you can. It is very important to know the deadlines for financial aid applications at each school you are considering. Contact their financial aid offices to ensure you don't miss out. So, once you complete your applications and meet all of the deadlines, then what? If you plan to start college in the fall, you will receive an award letter from the Financial Aid Office in the spring. This letter is based on your FAFSA application and lists each source of aid and its amount for one academic year. It is your responsibility to read and understand all of the information in the award letter. If you have questions, talk to your parents or guardians, counselors, or University of Wisconsin system representatives. You must apply annually for each academic year you wish to be considered for financial aid. Remember that in the end, this is about your education, and seeking out and obtaining financial aid is your responsibility. By doing your research and being proactive, you can make paying for college a whole lot easier. So get out there and take advantage of these great opportunities.
All right. Well, one of the many ways that we reach out to prospective students and their families to help them navigate the complicated landscape of higher education. It's great work. And I want to note that two financial aid directors, one Randy McCready, the financial aid director here at UW-Parkside, and Paul Watson at UW-Stevens Point, provided great input and advice on the narrative for that video. So I want to finish today by thinking back to yesterday when we had that wonderful opportunity to go into the library here at UW-Parkside and interact with students and faculty and see some of the great work they're doing. And I was talking to the librarian, the head librarian here, Chancellor Ford's librarian, who's relatively new and has done some great things in opening up the space and making it more welcoming and figuring out ways to get kids to come in. It's a little different from when some of us went to the library where, God, you couldn't bring any coffee in and, you had to be quiet. You had to be quiet in the library. You couldn't talk. Now it's much more of a social center to help students come in. And of course, a lot more of the resources are electronically available. But the libraries are still in some way the heart and soul of our campuses, the place where if you can get the students there, if you can get them connected to the resources there, good things happen to their head. So I thought with that in mind, I'd read a short poem called In the Library, and this is by Charles Simic. There's a book called A Dictionary of Angels. No one has opened it in 50 years. I know, because when I did, the covers creaked, the pages crumbled. There I discovered the angels were once as plentiful as species of flies. The sky at dusk used to be thick with them. You had to wave both arms just to keep them away. Now the sun is shining through the tall windows. The library is a quiet place. Angels and gods huddled in dark, unopened books. The great secret lies on some shelf Miss Jones passes every day on her rounds. She's very tall, so she keeps her head tipped as if listening. The books are whispering. I hear nothing, but she does. Back to you, Regent.
When did we get a library? I told you we were on opposite ends of the building. On this end was a bowling alley and a bar. It's been a full year since we began inviting chancellors to discuss their strategic goals, their progress in meeting those goals, and impediments they face in meeting their goals. I am pleased that Chancellor Telfer volunteered to present his report this month, in addition to the report that Chancellor Ford provided yesterday. So, Chancellor Telfer, it's all yours.
Thank you, President Falbo. Board of Regents, we're very pleased I am very pleased to be here, but I do have to make a couple of comments. First, I don't know where Debbie went. Debbie's back there. This has been just a wonderful experience here. The students and all the other people who greet us here, it's just been a joy to be on your campus, and it's nice. I want you in control of our weather back home. It's doing very well. But a few other little things before I get started. First is I'm the visiting team. I'm on another campus talking about our campus, and that's kind of an interesting experience. But I also, you hear poetry, you hear other kinds of discussions, and then you're saying there's a tea time that comes after this, and I'm between some people here and their tea time, and that's scary. But what I would like to do is update you a little bit on our progress toward our strategic goals. And what I'd like to do in this presentation is talk a little bit about our campus strategic plan and how we are addressing it. I want to specifically talk about 3 areas. You've heard a lot about them, but I want to talk about the Whitewater perspective on some of these. One of those areas is LEAP. One of those areas is undergraduate research, and one of those areas is entrepreneurship. And as part of this, I'll show you a little video that I think shows how this works. And obviously, when I get done, I'll answer any questions that you have. We think that what we are doing is very closely aligned with our system goals of increasing the number of college graduates, increasing the creation of high-paying jobs, and increasing the strength of our communities. I am going to take a few minutes to give you a little bit of an overview of our campus. And what I am proud to say is we think the interest in UW-Whitewater is high. Our enrollment is nearly 12,000 students. We actually are down a little bit from last year, but our undergraduate total continues to grow. We're actually at 11,993. Beyond Wisconsin, there are 43 states represented in our student body. There are 42 countries represented as well. We have more than 1,100 graduate students who participate in 12 graduate programs. Our newest graduate program, scheduled to launch next fall, is the Doctorate of Business Administration. Last year, our students raised over $120,000 for philanthropic causes, and they recorded nearly 30,000 volunteer hours. Our campus has over 1,100 employees, and this year, last spring, for the 3rd straight year, we were named one of the top workplaces in southeastern Wisconsin by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. This is done on the basis of surveys of the people on our campus, so it's our people saying they find it to be a positive place in which to work. Along with students, or for our students, we have over 2,000 on-campus jobs for our students, because we think that's very important. In a town of 14,000 people, you cannot get to 14,000 people in Whitewater without counting students. It's hard to get jobs for all of our students. Our applications from prospective new freshmen last year were up 5% all through the year. Applications are up, but more than ever, our current students are choosing to stay at Whitewater. Last year, we had achieved our highest retention rate in our history at 80.3%. That was more than 1 percentage point higher than we'd ever been before. Our graduation rate was the highest we have ever had at 58.3%. That was 2.6 points higher than we had ever been before. I can't do one of these presentations without talking about it. We've had some success in intercollegiate athletics. We have 20 sports programs. 15 of them qualified for the national tournament last year, and we finished 4th in the Directors' Cup. But it may be even more important, our student athletes have higher grade point averages and higher graduation rates than our students in general. Our campus physically continues to evolve. Last year, we opened the doors to Laurentide Hall, which is the new home of the College of Letters and Sciences. This is an $18 million renovation, which is, as David Miller knows very well, took forever for us to get done, but we did get it done, and it is like it is a new building. It won LEED certification for its sustainability features, and we're proud of that. In that physical planning area right now, we are involved, and it's not part of our specific strategic plan, we're involved in the campus master planning process. Folks, it's been 20 years since we were involved in that process, and we're long overdue, and we're delighted to be in this. It is critical to everything we do within on our campus, but we also are very proud of the existing physical environment. We think it's a key to part of our success. There's sustainability built into much of what we do. We think there's beauty built into much of what we do, and we think it supports the learning our students do as well as the living they do on our campus. So to begin the conversation about the strategic goals specifically, I want to mention our strategic plan. We have 5 broad goals that are part of our strategic plan, and we think attention to these areas will help us advance regional leadership, national presence, and we hope a global vision. The 5 main goals associated with our strategic plan are in the area of programs and learning, the scholar-educator community, diversity and global perspectives, regional engagement, and professional and personal integrity. Now, I want to talk about those before we go on in the slides. Programs and learning, clearly that's what we're about. We're trying to have a place where we have strong academic programs, where our students are learning, our faculty and staff are learning while they're here. That involves more than just the programs. It involves where they have these programs, which is why the physical master planning process is so very important. Our scholar-educator community, we want to be a community of scholars, and that includes the students from the minute they get on campus, and we hope sometimes even before they get to campus, but it also includes the development of our faculty and our staff. Diversity and global perspectives, this board knows full well that that's a very important issue to all of us. It's clearly an important issue to our campus. But we think the global, not just the diversity that's domestic, but we're talking about diversity involving the world. Regional engagement, and I'll talk a little bit more about personal and professional integrity a little bit later. What I want to do now is talk a little bit about how we are using these. And I'll start off with programs and learning. Well, I'll back up just a second. We have a group called the Strategic Planning and Budget Committee. It represents our campus. There are students on this group. There are classified staff on this group. There are academic staff on this group. There are faculty. There are administrators on this group. And this group, we started, the strategic plan has been around a while. And we decided a way to avoid having to go through the entire strategic planning process again was to really say we're comfortable with these 5 areas of goals, but what are some things we're going to work on for a 2-year period? So in 2010, we developed for 2010, 2012, some specific goals that we would be going after. We've done that again for 2012, 2014, and what we're trying to do with the direction of the Strategic Planning and Budget Committee is really work on some specific areas within that. So I want to talk to you about some of the specific areas. I am not going to give you the detail. If you want to look on the website, you'll get our interim report for this, but I want to give you a flavor of what we're talking about. The first of 3 goals within programs and learning is we want to review the current academic program array, undergraduate and graduate, adjusting program size and creating new academic programs that align with the university mission, resources, the evolving workforce in the state, institutional plans for growth, and projected state, regional, and national needs. You will deal with later on, the Education Committee dealt yesterday with 2 of those programs, and you dealt last month with our Doctorate of Business Administration. But that's one of the goals, and we have each of the colleges working very hard on that because we want them thinking about where we are going. The second goal is to develop a comprehensive approach to improved advising that promotes an integrated learning and enhanced educational experience consistent with our LEAP initiative. I want to talk a little bit, I said, about LEAP because LEAP has been a very important effort on our campus. Remember, LEAP stands for Liberal Education and America's Promise. It's an effort through the AAC&U that has been adopted by this system, and I would say we've adopted it very heavily. We're working to help ensure that all of our programs help students achieve in 4 key areas. Achievement in those areas will help our students be better graduates, better people, and put them on track to better paying jobs. The 4 broad outcomes of LEAP are knowledge of human cultures and the physical and natural world, intellectual and practical skills, personal and social responsibility, and integrative learning. Each of these broad areas has subcategories which form the essential learning outcomes. Across our campus, departments and colleges are evaluating their programs to make sure they meet these directives. They are establishing and implementing assessment measures to ensure growth in these areas. We have had extensive campus buy-in, and part of it is supported by the provost office, where we supported committee work, implementation plans, and assessment. We have sponsored many co-curricular activities, including a nationwide LEAP Day a year and a half ago. Last year we had, and you're going to love this, we had a campus-wide assessment day. Now, most people don't get all that excited about, let's go have an assessment day, but we had a very successful assessment day where we worked together on this. We understand that we need to increase the awareness of LEAP, and these events have worked to try to help us with that. But beyond awareness, we are putting all of this into action. Teams have developed campus-wide rubrics. Campus-wide rubrics allow us to track student progress across disciplines. We've created rubrics for oral communication, written communication, diversity, and critical thinking. The data being generated by these rubrics will be used to help us change how we look at student learning. More than ever, we have a better idea of what works and what does not. As a result, we can more efficiently adjust, duplicating what works and changing what does not. And believe me, folks, this is not simply in the academic areas. This is done in our university center by the people who run the university center, by the students who work there. They have learning outcomes associated with the jobs that they have on campus, and we've tried to make it go across our campus. In summary, the goals of LEAP align well with the directive to better prepare students. LEAP is helping us to ensure that our students are prepared with the integrative learning skills, the multicultural competencies, and the practical knowledge needed to excel in our ever-changing and increasingly global society. Our third goal within the programs and learning area is to develop an institutional approach to consider assessment data across campus units, including strategies to evaluate the data. I think in what I said about LEAP, I tried to give you a sense of how we are trying to use that. Our second major area is the scholar-educator community. And under this, we have, in the current 2012-2014 area, we have two specific goals. One is to increase support for faculty, staff, and students to engage in research and scholarly activity. That's a goal that we've identified for ourselves, and we're trying to do it, obviously with extramural funds, but clearly with campus funds as well. And the second one within that area is to collect, review, and disseminate data regarding the levels of participation and effectiveness of high-impact educational practices for various student populations, and to use these data to improve our high-impact practices. The example I'll give on that part of it is we have a program called Pathway to Success for students who come in who are kind of marginal admits. We looked at the data on the students who were going to be successful, and we found that students who had to take remedial classes, and we've talked about that here, if they got them done early, they were much more likely to be successful. So what we do is we require them to take the remedials early, and we have them in groups together where they get the maximum amount of support. They're required to do supplemental instruction. They're required to do extra advising and tutoring and so forth. And what we found is those students have been able to get back on track. And that's an effort where we're using this to try to help people do better. I do want to mention undergraduate research as well, because we have embraced that within this scholar-educator community, so that we have an undergraduate research program that really supports what we do in all of the disciplines. It supports inquiry-driven research, scholarship, and creative activity. It includes faculty-mentored research programs and curriculum-based projects. And We have success with it because we have outstanding students, first-rate faculty and staff working with them, and we provide some financial support so they're able to get involved in their different activities. Sometimes we have a misconception, or people out there have a misconception that undergraduate research is in the sciences. It is, but it's far beyond that, and we have it on all 4 of our colleges. Last year, over 200 people at UW-Whitewater participated formally in the undergraduate research program. They represented all 4 colleges and almost every one of our 30 departments. In 2013, 120 of our students presented on our on-campus undergraduate research day, and over 80 of the students received some kind of financial aid in a research grant for what they did. 77 traveled to the National Conference on Undergraduate Research, and 15 of these students were then chosen for full-time summer internships. Undergraduate research is clearly a high-impact practice. The data we have, the data we use, show that the students who are involved in undergraduate research are more likely to be retained and more likely to graduate. This is a program that is growing at UW-Whitewater, and we think it's a major contributor to some of the successes that we've been having. We've now launched a spin-off of it, which is called RAP, which is the Research Apprenticeship Program, which is a program aimed at freshmen and sophomores. It's not yet in undergraduate research, or it's a little different kind of undergraduate research, but they get preparation and training with a mentor. They learn a little bit about research, and they take a 1-credit class run by our undergraduate research office. Our research enterprise, as evidenced by that, is continuing to grow. And what we find is that students involved in undergraduate research are gaining valuable field experience. They're helping the students become more well-rounded and more employable. They don't just have a degree, they have a degree coupled with relevant experience. And we think it helps build stronger communities. By sending a large contingent of students to the national conference, they collaborate with scholars and other students from across the country and around the world. And we have research projects that also serve the communities and try to help address some of the state's biggest challenges. Recent projects include water conservation for the city of Whitewater, the volatility of discharge effluents in Wisconsin's streams and rivers, effects of the wolf population on the coyote population in northern Wisconsin, strategies for promoting better intercultural communication, and the examination of correlations between Wisconsin music programs and academic success. Finding answers to imperative research questions and then contributing these answers in the general pool of ideas helps us serve our Wisconsin communities with data-driven solutions. At this point, I would like to show you a brief video that really brings some of the LEAP and some of the undergraduate research to the surface. This is a story about a woman named Nikki Vo, and I think it encompasses some of the themes I've talked about. So please enjoy the video.
Resin Lab, we are a custom formulator of adhesives. We do mostly epoxies, but we have a little bit of silicones and urethanes, as well as acrylics, and so anywhere from aerospace to industry to construction to medical to electronic boards, we've got a large portfolio of customers.
She was a very intelligent student, and I would say very inquisitive. I knew she was going to go somewhere.
I started out as a polymer lab tech, and then within a year I was promoted to R&D chemist, and then within 3 years I was now promoted to lab manager. So I've been lab manager for a little over a year now.
This vat with 1290, and then it pumps down, and pneumatically it dispenses into the cartridge. Do you do both A and B, or just the B side?
I did the A side.
Oh, you did the A side already? Being a liberal arts college, I was able to learn a lot of things that are very important for my job now. So communication skills, presentation skills, working in a team skill, deadlines.
Melanie, you're a natural.
And also really being able to relate to your audience?
A little bit of the powder, see if I can get the crystalline structure a little bit smaller.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I'll roll it again, fearful of
Yeah.
rolling that in an oven above 130.
I really have to understand what their perspective is and tailor my approach to them. And I think that coming from Whitewater, I was able to learn a lot of those core principles. Okay. Yeah, this looks great. I was actually a pre-med major when I was at Whitewater, and I went through the undergraduate research program, and talking with a lot of the chemistry professors, they all agree that my calling was in chemistry. So after a lot of consideration, I decided to go ahead and switch out of pre-med and go into chemistry, and it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. I actually did 2 different undergraduate research projects. The first one was with Dr. Hahn, and what we did was we took chemicals and we grew crystals, and based on those crystals we were able to identify what those crystals are. Through identification we were able to see what the chemical bonds are and be able to figure out that the core bonds that were involved in the transition metals bonded together.
She was very smart and very sharp, and so she asked a lot of questions, and sometimes she really inspired me to think in the other way.
I know that when I went to go onto grad school, one of the professors looked at my portfolio and she commented how she liked that I came from a smaller university. And I asked her the reason why, and she confirmed that students who come from a smaller university have more skill sets because they were able to work with the professors one-on-one versus coming from a large university and you're working with a postdoctorate or another research advisor. At UW-Whitewater, you can work with the professors one-on-one.
She contacted us about setting up an internship, and for a long time we've been trying to establish an internship program in chemistry. And so we jumped at the opportunity, and Dr. Hahn and I went up to visit her. So that's something that we hope to see come to the fore.
In the bigger university settings, a lot of professors don't have the time or the patience, and Dr. Hahn and Dr. Anderson both showed a lot of patience, and they really cared about their students, and that helped a lot. And if you really can maintain contact with them, even beyond graduate school, Dr. Hahn and Dr. Anderson are both still my mentors to this day. I still ask them a lot of industry questions, a lot of career advice, and even some personal questions. So it's been very advantageous. So not just the research, but the relationship as well.
The third area that I said I would talk about from our strategic plan is diversity and global perspectives. And we have 3 sub-goals in this area, or 3 goals for this 2012-14 time period. The first of those is to increase the understanding of both domestic multiculturalism and international perspectives as central to the university curricular and co-curricular priorities. And the discussion that happened really related to that is we're committed to increasing the number of underrepresented students on our campus, and we've done, we think, a good job of that. We're trying to go further in international kinds of things, but we also want to have all of those people who are associated with our campus contribute to the learning of all the rest of us. And we think it's very important that we consider those 2 areas, domestic multiculturalism and international perspectives, as something that can go along together, and that's what we're trying to work on. The second goal in this area is really to identify, examine, and implement models for success for students of opportunity. And that will include students who are underrepresented. It will include non-traditional students. It will include veteran students and so forth. And we think we've made significant progress in a number of those areas. The third goal within the area is to examine and improve campus policies, procedures, and practices to increase the diversity of students, faculty, and staff as a way to enhance the learning environment for all. We just think that's such an important goal that although it's really been there and we haven't had all the success we wanted. We think it's an important one for us to keep working with. The fourth area is regional engagement. And within this area, we have two specific goals. One is to improve community and regional connections in ways that enhance our capability to align educational, cultural, and athletic programs and services with community and regional needs. And the second is to increase campus capacity to connect students, faculty, and staff in service engagement, entrepreneurship, and economic development in ways that advance student learning and foster community and regional partnerships. To that tune, I think you know we have an entrepreneurship program. You know we have an entrepreneurship program that has done very well. And we really see that as part of the mission of what we're trying to do. And we're looking at ways to maximize the use of that. In 2008, we agreed with the city to set up a technology park on the eastern side of town. A year and a half after that, we built, about 2010, we built what you see in the picture there, the Innovation Center. I know a number of you have visited that center. We have a new client coming in yet this fall that will take 5 of the suites that we have there. So we're becoming crowded right now. But probably the most important thing we have associated with that is it gives a chance for what our students do and what our faculty do. It gives a chance for that to impact our community. Companies are coming because they want the connections with our students and our faculty, probably more importantly with our students. They want those opportunities. And just 4 of the folks who are there right now. One is Foundry Solutions. That was started by one of our art professors. And his company he worked with MJOHN through WISIS, and that's a very successful endeavor. He actually is getting checks from that. I mean, that's far along. We have several patents associated with it. But what he did is came up with a new process for making molds to do precision metal casting. And it's going to save industry many, many, many dollars. And it's something that he's running on our campus. But he's also expanded so that he's working with some of the other companies in the area as an advisor as they do some kind of research there. We've released him from some of his faculty duties so he can do that. We have another company called OptSolve, which was recently awarded a patent for math algorithms. When I say recently, it was last week. Blackthorn Capital Management is there also, and they have 4 of the suites that we have, and they're producing a new generation of financial thinking and research. And another one is something called Slipstream, and Slipstream is a company that has partnered with the National Parks Association, Parks and Rec Association, to be able to provide ways to register for different things at parks, community organizations, so you can register for softball, soccer, and all those kinds of things. And that product launch was launched several months ago, and they're going great guns. But the point here really is that we have things where there are connections with our communities, where our students are attracting these businesses to the area. Our students are getting real-time experiences there. They're learning about, some of them are starting their own businesses, and they're having a chance to be very successful. This year, Governor Walker came to campus to present the first checks in something we call the Capital Catalyst campaign. And one of those went to one of our students, a gentleman named Andrew Heft, for work he does on, it's called Date Check Pro. It's an organization, or it's a company, a product that keeps track of expiration dates on supermarket products in the shelves. But he brought another young gentleman there, Joe Newman, and Joe came, and he was from the Chicago area, and he moved to Whitewater because he wanted to be involved in this particular, the excitement that we have going around it. My final area of the strategic plan that I wanted to talk about is personal and professional integrity. Believe me, we bite off more than we can chew sometimes, and I would think in this area that may be one of the areas. This is a tough one because it's tough to identify precisely what you mean in this, but we're trying to do that. One of the goals there is, and you folks on the Regents, you've heard this, and all my colleagues over here have clearly heard this, to develop fair and reasonable structure for workload and compensation for faculty, staff, and students. And so we have groups of faculty, staff, and students who are looking at these issues and trying to define what specific issues are there and how we can, with things under our control, try to address some of those. And the second goal within that is to assess and enhance a campus culture where respect, civility, personal responsibility, and honesty are valued, modeled, and affirmed. We think that's so very important. It's a tough one. But after all, we ought to be attacking tough kinds of challenges, and that clearly is one of the ones that we're trying to address. So what I've tried to say is within our 5-point strategic plan, we've identified a dozen goals that we're trying to work specifically on over this 2-year period. We have committees of the SPBC as well as people they draw in to work with them that are working on these. They're reporting back to us periodically. We're reporting to the campus community the kinds of things that we're doing. We clearly have a commitment to our strategic plan. I mentioned the 3 areas of LEAP, undergraduate research, and entrepreneurship just as examples of some of the things we're doing. But through these collaborations and operations and situations, I believe we are helping put Wisconsin, helping the state of Wisconsin in our area. These programs have helped us increase our retention and graduation rates to historic levels. They are linking the university to entrepreneurship and business development. They are strengthening Wisconsin communities through service, engagement, and research. And we're committed to continuing in this vein. So that's my presentation on what we're doing in the area of strategic planning and strategic plan goals. If there's time, I'll take questions. If not, I'll take questions afterwards.
Any questions of Chancellor Telfer? Yes, John.
Just a comment. There's certainly much discussion at both the national and state level about government's role in creating jobs. And I think your presentation certainly speaks to what a great investment in public dollars University of Wisconsin system is and what you're doing at Whitewater in terms of economic development and preparing people for higher paying jobs. It's what we should be doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.
We will move into our committee reports, and I'll now call upon Regent Manydeeds to present a report of the actions taken by the Capital Planning and Budget Committee. Ed?
Thank you, President. Under the guidance of veteran Regent Tim Higgins, I've worked hard to streamline my presentation. Before I give it, though, I want to reassure everyone, as I'm sure you know, we received the materials, had excellent presentations from the various campuses, and had every question that we had, and we had many that were insightful, answered to our satisfaction. So being fully advised in that manner, we passed unanimously the following resolutions, 1.3C to 1.3I. I'll go through them so that they're on the record. Resolution 1.3C was a request for authority to lease space for the University of Wisconsin Service Center. Resolution 1.3D was a request from the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee for authority to increase the budget of a renovation or demolition project, and why they're needing the increase was fully explained and made a lot of sense. Resolution 1.3E, UW River Falls, was requesting authority to construct the Falcon Center for Health, Education, and Wellness project, very much needed. Resolution 1.3F, UW-Stevens Point, requesting authority to construct a residence hall renovation phase 2. The resolution 1.3G, UW-Whitewater, also requesting authority to construct a residence hall renovation, but this is phase 1. Resolution 1.3H were 2 campuses, UW-Stout and UW-Oshkosh. UW-Stout is requesting authority to continue to construct and renew a building which is known as Harvey Hall. This is phase 2 of that project. UW-Oshkosh's Clothes Services Science Center and Nursing Education Building renovation project was also approved by our committee. Finally, UW-Parkside in Resolution 1.3I requested approval of maintenance and upgrade of a fire protection system in 2 of its residence halls. The committee unanimously approved those resolutions, and we would ask that you do the same thing. Thank you.
To present a report on the actions taken by the Education Committee.
Thank you. You have the written report of the committee in your materials. I'd like to first turn to full agenda items. We unanimously approved Resolution 11B, which authorizes the consolidation of 2 existing Regent policies, 14-6 and 14-9. We're essentially doing away with 14-9 and updating 14-6 to reflect terminology and wording consistent with case law, state and federal regulations. We received an explanation of this from Associate Vice President Vicki Washington. I want to mention that doing away with one policy and then resulting in 1 instead of 2 is certainly not a retreat from our commitment to policies that protect our students and our employees. So this effort is to strengthen that commitment, not to retreat from it. So I would move the board's approval of Resolution 11B. Aye. Thank you. We return to our discussion of our planning process and goals. Our discussion clarified a few points of the draft that our committee has been circulating among committee members and also the provosts. And a final version of this document called Education Committee's Priorities and Goals will be submitted to you, President Falbo, after this meeting. Our first priority as a committee this year will be a thorough discussion of something that Chancellor Telfer just mentioned, and that is faculty workload and compensation, looking at the entire job description of a faculty member, not just the number of hours they spend in the classroom. And to launch this, we're enlisting the help of the system administration to do 3 things. First of all, to conduct a review of board policies, institution policies, system policies relating to faculty workload, and the whole package, teaching, service, research. Second, we are asking system administration's help with scheduling some presentations, especially bringing in somebody who can give us a national perspective of this topic of faculty workload. We have a person in mind, and I think you could look forward to not only having a presentation to our committee, but also a presentation to the full board. It's a pretty important topic, and it's important that we get this right. And finally, we've asked system administration to conduct a thorough study of faculty compensation, its impact on our efforts to recruit and retain, and most importantly, on the quality of the educational experience that we're delivering, including research within the system. We heard a very interesting presentation from the provost and vice provost of UW-Parkside on the enthusiasm for teaching and the success of students at this campus. The faculty here have been busy developing additional programs for the UW Flex option, including a number of career-oriented certificates, which in some cases can be used as stackable credits toward a degree. We enjoyed a video that was produced by a graduate student here, showing a day in the life of 3 UW-Parkside students. And for myself, I would say that this was a very sensitive job, a piece of work, I should say, of not only showing these 3 students on campus, but showing these 3 students in the context of the challenges that they have in their daily lives. We heard from an Hispanic student who has parents who do not enjoy English as their primary language. And the issues of her being a first-generation university student, dealing with the communication of explaining to her parents what she's trying to do and how she's doing it. You know, that's a challenge enough for a young person coming out of high school, but you saw how she was meeting her challenges. We also saw the life of a young man who has 2 big priorities. One of them was to be a successful student at this campus, and his second one was to be a successful father of 3 young boys. And if the video is accurate, and if his heartfelt statements are accurate, it sounds like he's being successful in both of his priorities. And then, last but not least, we heard the life story of a non-traditional student, our own Regent Tracy Rybar, which was very, very heartwarming about being successful in family and work, and then making the decision that she wanted to come back to school. Tracy, we all know, has been doing this very successfully, but you also saw in the video a peek at the life of somebody who makes that decision and what challenges that kind of person faces. And we have this all over our system, and we need to be sensitive to meeting these kinds of students where they are and not just expecting them to change everything to accommodate us. Then finally, we had a very interesting discussion on a topic that for many might look rather simple on the surface, but when you drill down into it, it becomes very complicated, and that is this whole question of remediation. For some people, you talk about what the system institutions are doing in remediation, and you immediately think that the high school system has just failed us. But that's just not true, because a lot of the work that's required of our institutions in remediation is remediation for non-traditional students who are coming back to school, having been out in the workforce or having raised families. Tracy mentioned that on the day she was coming back to UW-Parkside, quadratic equations were just not at the top of her mind in entering back into those math classes. So, this is not a person where our K-12 system failed her. To the contrary. She's an example of somebody who needs remediation to be successful, and it has nothing to do with our K-12 system. Senior Vice President Mark Nook led us through some of these complexities, and the board can look forward to a lot more on this whole question of remediation, including a more detailed report to us in December. And President Riley announced that he is appointing a group, a task force, to study this issue system-wide, and we could expect a report, I believe, in the spring. Right. So, a very interesting discussion, complicated subject. We then we started with our consent agenda. I'll now turn to our consent agenda. We unanimously approved our minutes from our last meeting, and then approved 5 other resolutions, which I will now move for adoption by the board. These are all part of Resolution 11A. Part 2 is to authorize implementation of the Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Arts in Criminology at UW-Whitewater. Part 3 is to authorize the implementation of the Master of Science in Applied Economics at UW-Whitewater. Part 4 is authorizing the Bachelor of Arts in Writing at UW-Superior. And Part 5 is authorizing the Professional Science Master in Conservation Biology at UW-Stout. And our final part of the consent agenda was to approve the reappointments of Dr. James Bennett and Dr. Patrick Robinson to the Natural Areas Preservation Council. So I move that.
Mr. President, I guess I wanted to wait to give you a chance. What I would strongly recommend is that we find a way to take those 3 videos, and I don't know if you can do it by email or if you have to send the hard copies, DVDs, and send them to Representative Steve Noss, to every Education Committee member in both houses, and to the Joint Finance Committee members. They are going to be reacting, and they are reacting to what happened yesterday. You've got to prove the value and why we're not giving away the store and what the value is, and I think this is a perfect, if you remember I said earlier, humanize our story. This humanizes our story, so I would strongly recommend that.
I'll bet that I could work with Chancellor Ford and we could get that done really fast. Good. Thanks for that suggestion. We'll do that.
Yes.
Just as a matter of process, I would like to call that get the rust out mediation. And I think many members on this board might have enjoyed that as well, because the quadrilateral occasion just doesn't come up in normal conversation over when I have a dinner party.
I don't know. You engaged me in a conversation about that at the reception last night. That was the first time for me.
It wasn't the first time for John Drew.
Because he was in the library, I know. Okay, thank you all. I'll now call upon Regent Higgins to present the report on the READY Committee.
Thank you, President Falbo. A little preface. We are not going to be presenting any motions for approval today. I do want to point out that you have been kind enough to have looked at the work that the committee has done, both within the parameters of our regular Regent meetings and in their teleconferences, and have taken up the efforts they've gone through in the September meeting. And since our next committee meeting will be on November 1st, in conjunction with the approval of the Economic Development Incentive Grants on campus, you'll hear our work at the December meeting also. So I just didn't want it to sound like we're not doing anything simply because of the fact we're not asking you to approve our resolutions. Besides, Chuck gets really nervous when I don't have resolutions because he is, in fact, the vice chair of this committee, and I don't want to make him look bad. You're welcome. We had a presentation by UW-Parkside Chancellor Debbie Ford to begin the meeting by providing an overview of UW-Parkside's undergraduate research, economic development, and campus collaborations with technology companies that are working with WISES. Chancellor Ford then introduced Dr. Abby Karuvala, an associate professor in operations management at UW-Parkside. And Chancellor, I also believe that Dr. Abby is the assistant dean of business? Co-chair of the business department. Thanks. Pardon me. He showcased ways that UW-Parkside faculty and students are providing their time and talent to local, regional, and national businesses. In particular, he highlighted ongoing collaborative relationships with Aurora Healthcare, FedEx, and Skies Fall Media that have provided numerous ongoing opportunities for UW-Parkside to provide assistance to businesses. Following Dr. Karuvala's presentation, Jim Mersky of ProCube LLC, a graduate of UW-Parkside, highlighted assistance he's received from UW-Parkside faculty and students and technological resources to develop a linear to rotary motion prototype wheelchair, which is being used to design a unit that is less, well, basically it's less hard on the user of the wheelchair. And I think we had a great demonstration of that when President Falbo proved that he's a really good sport when I asked him to get up and demonstrate how somebody who's never touched a wheelchair before could use it. So you did a fantastic job, and I appreciate your willingness to help out. Chancellor Ford concluded her presentation by showcasing additional research, economic development, and innovation activities. Following Chancellor Ford's presentation, Paul Fowler of the Wisconsin Institute of Sustainable Technology at UW-Stevens Point provided an update on WIST research in the areas of biofuels, renewable materials, and related disciplines. So we at the READY Committee had the opportunity to see how our campuses, at least a couple of our campuses, are actually putting their time and talent and resources of campus to work to help create jobs in their communities. Finally, Regent Emeritus Jeff Partel and I provided an update on the incentive grant program. Highlights of the program included, first, we were very pleased that the Joint Finance Committee approved the incentive grant process last week. Second, in our meeting with the leadership of the Joint Finance Committee, Regent Milner and Vice President Miller and I had a great opportunity to exchange views and to hear their interpretation of the legislation they passed, which was very cognizant or congruent to what we were doing, thank heaven. But they did ask us to slightly change the makeup of the selection committee to add more non-UW system members, which we have done or are in the process of doing right now. They also were kind enough to classify some of the priorities in the legislation, or to explain some of the priorities in the legislation that didn't quite come across in the stark language, specifically the areas of economic development and of workforce development are, in their minds, more important than the area of affordability of education for the purpose of these particular grants. And so our committee selection process has been slightly modified to take that into account. Now, it's important to understand that the funds that are granted must be used in the 2013 to 15 biennium. So we have a real urgency to get these grants in, get them reviewed, and get the money out. And I'm happy to say that we are expecting now, with a timeline that's been approved, to complete the selection process by the end of October. And as I mentioned, we will have a meeting on November 1st of the READY Committee to approve the selections or to review, and we hope approve the selection committee at that point in time. And then we'll get the actual money out to the campuses by mid-November so that they can start working on the wonderful projects that are going to complete. I want to thank those on campuses who are involved in developing the applications for their patience as the application and selection process has been worked out. We look forward to receiving many excellent proposals. President Falbo, that's the end of my report.
I'm just like a true veteran. The one thing I wanted to clarify for the full board, and I know you talked about it and we talked about it, is that the awards are going to be made prior to the next Board of Regents meeting through the executive committee of the board, correct? Okay, because of the time frame that of getting the money out and getting the process going for real, we had to do that. And a full report will be made in December on what the awards were. Thanks, Tim. We'll call on Regent Whitburn to present a report of the actions taken by the Business and Finance Committee.
Thank you, President Falvo. The committee took decisions on 9 different resolutions. I propose that we take 8 of them in mass if it is the judgment of the regents not to appeal any back. One of them requires a roll call vote, so we'll deal with that last. I should mention that we concluded work on several different issues that we've been talking about in the committee the last several months, and the decisions that we took were unanimous in each case. The committee approved a contract with the Green Bay Packers associated with a September 2016 football game hosted at Lambeau Field between UW-Madison and Louisiana State University. One of the sensitivities that we communicated to those at the Madison campus who are liaisoning and working this through with the Packers is the need to keep student tickets affordable for students. We also approved a modification to a sponsored research agreement with Avon High Life, related to research and development of products used in and around milking machine clusters. The committee received a briefing regarding organizational changes that now have been undertaken in and around the HRS system. The operation and reporting lines for HRS will move from the UW-Madison campus to the UW System Administration. This transition, once implemented, will involve approximately 110 FTEs with annual expenditures in and around $18 million. This is service fee funded. You'll recall at our last meeting we received a risk report from PricewaterhouseCoopers in and around risk assessed in connection with the cutover to the HRS system, and those consultants recommended this change. It will allow more direct linking of policy development and implementation. You should know that the committee will continue to receive updates regarding the risks and the implementation of the HRS roadmap throughout the stabilization process. As you know, the recently enacted state budget required the regions to forward to the legislature a number of important policy positions. We have completed work in our meeting yesterday on 2 of those, and we would like to suggest approval by the full board this morning. The committee approved a UW system program revenue carry-forward policy establishing a minimum reserve level of 10% in certain funds and reporting thresholds requiring justification for balances above 15%. The policy was modified from the previous draft that we talked about broadly last month to include policy goals, to include a description of the fund structure, and to clarify that only tuition and auxiliaries are subject to the 10% reserve, and that the 15% reporting threshold was not a cap on year-end balances, but rather a level above which institutions will be required to provide justification. The committee agreed to review the reserve and reporting figures annually over the next 5 years. This program revenue balances and reserve policy now, as you know, will be submitted, assuming that we'll approve it here now, to the Joint Finance Committee. The requirement was that we have this done by the end of the year, and we're happy to be timely in our submission. The committee also approved a UW policy regarding the expenditure of tuition and fee revenues in state GPR dollars. The policy explains how UW system collects, manages, and spends state GPR and tuition dollars. Each institution charges expenses initially to its GPR funds, and then UW system administration uses a monthly process to distribute a proportionate amount of expense to both the GPR fund and the tuition fund based on the relative source of funds percentage. It's a complicated matter. This policy will also be submitted to the Joint Committee on Finance upon full board approval. At our December meeting, we hope to bring to you the final of the required submissions, namely addressing the question of how tuition and tuition fee and GPR dollars are distributed across the campuses. that you'll see in December. As you know, our relationship with WISNet is changing. In that regard, the board approved a resolution that authorizes the president to go to the legislature now and to request statutory changes related to the timeline in which the legislature has directed us to implement these changes. Current statute requires us to have this done earlier than the expected completion in September of 2014. We're now going to be requesting a suspension of the deadline through the end of January of the following year. The committee then dealt with resolutions associated with three pieces to the salary range issues. The President has requested that we widen our ranges from 90 to 110% of the midpoint of ranges to a broader 80 to 120% of adjusted peer medians. The truth is the current ranges limit our flexibility to set salaries sometimes necessary in connection with individual circumstances. So in the first resolution, we are changing our policy and broadening the median, the range from the midpoint, again from 90, 100 to 110%, which is what we've had in place for a long time, to a broader range of 80 to 120%. Secondly, we approve proposed senior executive salary ranges for the 2013 to 2015 biennium under and consistent with the broadened ranges that I just talked about. This action doesn't change salaries, does not change salaries, but only adjusts the actual ranges to address the competitive marketplace. I should stress and point out that some of these ranges have not been adjusted since 2006. Finally, certain of the ranges, under certain of the ranges, the Regents and the system have the authority to adjust the ranges. In other cases, we don't, and we have to go to the legislature, and namely to JOCR, to accomplish the changes. So in the final resolution, the Joint Committee on Employment Relations must approve any modifications to the salary ranges for the provost, vice chancellors in the non-doctoral campuses and the UW system vice presidents. These ranges have not been modified since 2008. We approved the resolution updating these ranges. So then, let me move Resolution 1 to A1, A2, A3, 2C, 2D, 2E, F1, and F3.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I would then like to move Resolution 1 to F2, which does require a roll call vote. Under this, we approve the salary ranges. We're not changing any salaries, but we approve the change in the salary ranges for senior executives resulting from the amended region policy proposed in Resolution 1 to F1, which we have just approved.
Is there a second? Oh, there was, okay. There was a question.
Having struggled through yesterday's discussion about this at the committee meeting and continuing to look at this from those looking over our shoulders, I just checked because of something that was already said. I was already referred to our statutory requirements that we can turn to as terms of empowering us and requiring us to do certain things. Apparently there is statutory requirement that the board set these types of salaries within a peer, looking at the peer comparisons. And I guess I would say that, again, from my former life, there's a statutory requirement that all local governments have to keep their values on their assessment books within 12% average, high-low of the marketplace within every 4 years, I believe, which is why local governments have to make sure they reassess, they put out reassessments. My point I'm trying to make is everyone expects the local governments to do that because it's a statutory requirement. I think what we should remind people that we're doing here is fulfilling a statutory requirement in so addressing these ranges. And I just want to make that statement on the record.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? June?
I realize the sensitivity of this issue, but I also understand that people are focusing in on the ranges rather than focusing on the established midpoint based on our peer grouping. And as Regent Farrell said, it is our responsibility to, at a regular timing, update that midpoint. And the range, rather than focusing in on the upper limit of the range, take a look at the lower limit of the range, because that range is something that we're required to do for our senior executives, and we're required to have them fit within that range as we establish it based on the midpoint. And rather than looking at the upper limit of the range, I suggest that everyone pay attention to the full range, because it's important that we, Regent Whitburn talked about being able to have the important flexibility of establishing salaries within that range. And part of the motivation for this is to enable us to do that.
Other comments? Jean, we will do a roll call vote.
Regent Baling? Regent Bradley? Regent Drew? Yes. Regent Evers? Regent Falbo?
Yes.
Regent Farrell? Regent Higgins? Yes. Regent Rybar? Yes. Regent Landis? Regent Menedietz? Yes. Regent Milner? Yes. Regent Mueller? Regent Peterson? Yes. Regent Pruitt? Regent Roberts, Regent Vasquez, Regent Walsh, Regent Whitburn. 16 yeses, 2 absent.
Thank you. Jerry, does that conclude your report?
It does.
Thank you. I know President Riley has some comments about this subject before we move on.
I do. Thank you, President Falbo, and thank you, Regents, for the vote you just took. I think it's an important one. I wanted to point out in the news release on this matter some of the language that's there. It says, the Regents have advocated strongly for years to acquire more authority over the university's personnel systems and compensation plans, and Regents today pledge to continue that effort. And then this quote from the President of the Board of Regents. All of these decisions, the revised policy, the broader ranges, and the individual adjustments are consistent with this board's commitment to competitive compensation for all faculty, staff, and academic leaders. We have given the chancellors the flexibility to reallocate existing resources wherever possible to address compensation equity and market gaps. Most campuses have made strategic reinvestments of this kind to retain top talent. There is no that is no substitute for broad merit-based pay plans, but it does make a difference. We had a conversation earlier about the board's role as advocates and watchdogs, and I guess I just wanted to make the point to you all that, in my opinion, the most important watchdog function that this board has is to ensure the quality and the reputation of the University of Wisconsin. If the board and the rest of us don't do that, not much of the rest of what we do will matter. And essential to that is a competitive pay plan for all our faculty and staff. We don't have one now, and we have to find new ways to get to one. And we have to do that, in my opinion, much sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Kevin. Moving on. With Vice President Debbie Durkin's retirement, the board needs to elect a new trust officer. Since Steve Wildeck has assumed Debbie's position, having been appointed interim Vice President for Finance, may I have a nomination of Steve Wildeck as trust officer? Mark, is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Congratulations, Steve, wherever you are. Since UW-Parkside holds a very special place in my heart, I took the advantage of being your board president to take on the assignment of reading the resolution of appreciation. But I would like to invite Chancellor Ford and Jana McLaughlin and Diane Donnelly. Can I do this up there? Is this being broadcast in the hallway? That's okay, I'll find it. Yes. This mic's on, so don't whisper to me. Would you please join us, Diane and Janet? And I have to endorse something Chancellor Telfer said about if you're walking down the hallways any time during the last couple of days, how friendly the people were, whether they had name tags on or didn't have name tags on. And I asked Chancellor Ford this morning, did you have a training session? And she said, no, we did not. So I would take that as very proud of the atmosphere here at UW-Parkside, led by many people, but in particular the people here. So whereas the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin System appreciates interacting with the UW-Parkside students, faculty, staff, and alumni to learn how the university is enriching minds and changing lives. And whereas UW-Parkside is committed to engaging, learning, and continuing to develop mutually beneficial partnerships, including those with more than 200 businesses and organizations in southeastern Wisconsin, through its Ralph Jaski Rhymes, don't read the parentheses, that was how to pronounce the name. Well, if you want to know, it rhymes with Klasky. Solutions for Economic Growth Center. And we're at... Yeah, you should have gone to the library more. You would have thought rhymes would have been at a very earlier part of your educational career. Whereas the university was selected to the 2013 President's Higher Education Community Service Honor Roll for exemplary community service programs and a commitment to volunteering and community-based learning, receiving the honor every year since the inception of the National Recognition Program in 2006. And whereas UW-Parkside is committed to innovative, engaged instruction as demonstrated by faculty in each of the university's 4 colleges, and the business program's continued accreditation by the Association of Advanced Collegiate Schools of Business, International. And whereas the Regents are impressed with the acceptance rate for pre-health and pre-med students to professional schools at nearly twice the national average, as well as the students' participation in the UW School of Medicine and Public Health RUSH program, Rural and Urban Scholars in Community Health. And whereas UW-Parkside has displayed a commitment to the advancement of professional educators through the Institute for Professional Educator Development, and whereas UW-Parkside is following a course of effective leadership set out in the 2006 Campus Master Plan that has produced an expanded student center, the new Pike River Suites student residence and the beautiful Rita Talent Pickens Regional Center for Arts and Humanities. Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents hereby extends its sincere appreciation to the University of Wisconsin-Parkside for the generous hospitality of Chancellor Deborah Ford and the entire Ranger Nation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And one of the things that I am most proud of is how the Parkside passion has been demonstrated throughout your visit here. As I said yesterday morning, if it has been your first visit, please do not make it your last visit. You are always welcome here in the Ranger Nation at UW-Parkside. Thank you for allowing us to be your host of this wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Are there any communications, petitions, or memorials from Regents? Is there any other business?